can be guided and helped as well. We thank you, and so be it. So, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to this beautiful Saturday, April 19th. Right, almost over, yes. It's flying by. And today we have our dear friend Yuri Castro here with us. Many of you have met him through the talks until the day that we grab him and bring here physically. But Yuri is actually speaking from Florida. And before I pass the word, Yuri, to you, I would like just to introduce you formally to this beautiful talk entitled A Dialogue with the Beyond. Yuri Castro has a doctoral degree in clinical psychology through Nova Southeastern, University. Is licensed in Florida and specializes in the treatment of severe and persistent mental illness in adolescents and adults. He is married and has two sons and has been residing in Florida since 2013. Yuri has been involved in Spiritism since an early age and started his journey as a speaker in 2012. He is a volunteer worker at the Conscious Living Spiritist Group in North Miami, Florida. Today, as I have mentioned, Yuri will be talking to us about a dialogue with the beyond. As usual, we would be we'll have an hour or so, and then we'll have moments for questions and comments that we may have. Yuri, please.
All right. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone who's there, those who are watching this online. It is always a pleasure to be here, even though not physically, but spiritually, I'm there. And today we will be talking about the book, The Spirit's Book. The title is A Dialogue with the Beyond. But the idea that we have here is to celebrate 168 years. Yesterday marked that date of the release of the Spirit's Book, which is a foundational book in the movement of Spiritism. It's something that really sort of came into the scenery and dictated a lot of the things that came after that. And we have the whole Spiritist movement, or Spiritism, as we like to call. Much thanks to the Spirit's Book, and much thanks also to the one that is called the codifier of the Spirit's Book and of Spiritism in general, Allan Kardec. He was a scientist, and just to give you a little background on the one who compiled all these questions, he was a scientist, an educator, and in the 19th century, what was happening was that there was a lot of things happening in the realm of spiritualism. So what was happening is there were these seances and mediumistic activities going on around in France at that time. And Kardec, who was actually, that's not the name he was born with. He was born with the name Hippolyte Rivail, and he adopted Allan Kardec as a pen name. So let's call him Kardec. He at that time was somebody that was very curious, and then he got invited in 1854 to attend a few seances. So a few friends invited him. He started to go there to see the phenomena that everybody was talking about. There was this rave around the spiritual phenomena that was happening. And he went there very skeptical at first, thinking that it was probably some kind of trick and people were just getting fooled. People were being fooled by these other so-called mediums. But what he actually, it wasn't the name at that time, but as we understand nowadays, mediums. So what happened actually was that he went in with a skepticism, understandably so, being again a scientist and an educator, somebody of a man of science who was very methodical. But he was intrigued that he started to see a lot of things that weren't truly explained by just a bunch of people who were fooling other people. It wasn't something as simple as that. He started to see this mediumistic phenomena happening, the spiritualistic phenomena happening, and he became very, very interested. So what he did was in around 56, around that time, he started to become really intrigued and interested. So what he did was he compiled a bunch of answers that he would get from questions that some of them he wrote himself, and he would send to different places where people were having these sort of dialogue with the beyond, with these called spirits, these discarnated bodies or people that were talking back and answering things, answering questions. So he would send a list of questions to different people in different places, and then he would get all those answers back. And what happened was he started this method of systematic questioning, of asking perhaps the same questions here and there. And if he would hear the same answer from, let's say, 3 or more mediums or spirits in different places, then he started to say, okay, perhaps there's something there. Because how could it be that people in different places are giving the same type of answers? So he started to compile those answers. And finally, April 18th, so today's April 19th, 2025, April 18th, 1857, he published a little book that I put the picture there, Le Livre des Esprits, which is the spirits book that he published with all these questions, over 1,000 questions and answers, some questions with follow-up questions even. And all of that's in that book, and questions covering everything from the spiritualistic side of things, the religious side of spiritism, philosophy, science, a lot of these questions that were very intriguing at the time. And the interesting piece is that he received answers, and at that time that he was compiling the book and all of that, from people all over the world. So the impact of the book was not only in France, as some may actually think. It was outside of France a lot. So he got questions with answers back from Germany, Italy, Spain, Belgium, Switzerland, United States, and even Brazil. So just to show again, how is it that different people, different so-called spirits in different places are giving the exact same answers. So just to give an idea of the book, he starts the book, and this today, the presentation is a study of the book. If there is ever such a thing as a summary of the book, we're going to try to do that. So the idea here is that he first started to address the doubters, because obviously he was met with a bunch of backlash at the time for the innovative aspect of it, and like everything that was being told to him. And he compiled all those answers and he published a book. He was met with a bunch of criticism. He was met with plenty of doubters. So the beginning of the book is him addressing some of the questions that the doubters have raised, such as, oh, what if these are people that are faking what they're saying or what they're writing? These so-called people, like, again, it became known later as mediums. What if these people are actually faking? But the thing is, Kardec is saying, how is it that we would have the same spirit communicate with a medium, let's say through writing? He would have a specific handwriting, and then miles and like hundreds and thousands of miles from there, another medium would be signing as the same spirit, but the person who signed had the same handwriting. How is it possible that two people in two different places were able to match the same handwriting of one spirit? They couldn't. And also he started to say, as well as in regards to the things that the spirits are saying, how is it that these people, the mediums who are answering these questions and who are helping the spirits communicate, how is it that they can know things far beyond their levels of study, their intellectual capacity, or even their knowledge? How is it that they can give such answers with such depth? It was something that it was very mind-boggling for the people, because there was no other explanation. How is it that somebody would give a scientific answer when they had zero scientific background? Moreover, how would they even give answers in languages that the medium doesn't speak? And we have that nowadays as well. We have that throughout the times of people being able to psychograph or being able to dictate things in different languages, and languages that they don't speak. So what Kardec was saying is there's definitely something more that we need to look into, that we must not ignore. So he compiled all of that, all the questions and answers, and he categorized them into four parts. So the book is divided into four parts. First is the causes. Second is the spirit world. Third is the moral laws, or the laws. And the fourth is the hope for the future, basically consolation. So he divided into that because Kardec, like I said, he was a very methodical individual. So my proposal today for our conversation here, our talk, is to learn about the Spirit's book, to learn about the questions and the chapters, going through the questions themselves and reflecting upon the questions themselves. Obviously, as I said before, there's over 1,000 questions in the book with over 1,000 answers. So it's impossible for us to cover everything. And so far, in fact, there are entire lectures that we give with only one question and one answer as the basis. So I don't mean to I don't intend to have the objective of covering everything in depth, but I want to give them sort of an overview for us to study and understand. And hopefully if you see something that you like in one of these questions, in one of these chapters, then you can go get the book yourself and read and study on your own. He asked, or he chose to put the first question, perhaps the most important one as far as understanding and given our curious nature, about God. What is God? So what the spirits will say is God is the supreme intelligence with capital S and capital I, first cause of all things. That's it. Supreme intelligence, first cause of all things. And we can only imagine how hard it was for them to define in a way that we can start to think that we grasp a little bit of what God actually is, because we truly don't. And the question number 3, they say, can it be said that God is infinity? An incomplete definition is what they'll say. Poverty of human speech, incompetent to define what transcends human intelligence. As we shouldn't expect it to be any different. Those of us who have studied or are studying about spiritism and understanding a little bit more about the immortality of the soul or process of spiritual depuration, we understand that we are still very much in the infancy of our plenitude, or of what everything that we will be able to achieve. And of course, we cannot say it's infinity, and even say that infinity is God is infinite in his perfections, but that's an abstraction. To say that God is infinity is to say that the attribute of a thing is a thing itself. That's what they're going to say further on in the book. But the idea here is that this is what they're saying, that for now, this is what you guys understand. This is what we're going to give you as far as an answer. But keep in mind that there's a lot lacking still in terms of language and understanding and intelligence as immortal spirits for us to truly comprehend what God is and all of his attributes in an in-depth way. In the same way that my son is 5 and I'm teaching him math, and he's learning about addition and subtraction, and he asks, is this math? Yes, it is math, but is it all that is to math? Are those simple things everything that encompass math? Absolutely not. But he's not. It doesn't matter how much I try to explain to him about algebra or calculus or things like that, because he can't comprehend right now. It's a parallel that I'm trying to draw here for us to understand that there's much more to this, but we're gonna get there eventually. What proof do we have then of the existence of God? And they're going to say, the axiom which you apply in all your scientific researches, there is no effect without a cause. Search out the cause of whatever is not the work of man, and reason will furnish the answer to your question. So when we look around us in nature, it's not the work of man. So there is no effect without a cause that precedes it. And something they will say too is the workman is known by his work. So reason tells us that an intelligent effect must have an intelligent force for its cause. And even in the question number 10, they ask, are we going to be able to comprehend the essential nature of God, or can we understand? They say no, because we lack, they say you, but we lack the sense required for comprehending it. But all we must know is that if there is no effect without a cause, and if that effect is something intelligence, there must be an intelligence force as its cause. Then further on, they start to explore a little bit more of spirit and matter to provide further understanding as well. And I chose here question number 22, which is, what definition can you give of matter? Matter is the element which enchains spirit, the instrument which serves it, and upon which at the same time it exerts its action. So let's pay attention to the language used here, which is very interesting. Matter is the element which enchains the spirit. Enchains. So put in chains. So in a way imprisons, in a way contains. So if we think of water inside a jar, the jar is sort of encasing that water, or it's containing that water. But they're saying here it's an instrument. So the matter, the flesh, the thing we have at our disposal, our bodies, our physical bodies, are this instrument that serves our spirit. And at the same time, our spirit exerts an action in that body. And then the next question is, what is spirit then? The intelligent principle of the universe. So this is something that they try to explain, and Kardec very intelligently put in that specific order for us to understand. And further on, question 25, we learn about the spirit, the perispirit, and the body. So these three things that are what we have, let's call it like that, that's what we have, and that's how we operate and we act upon our physical world as well as in the immaterial world, because we are all immortal. I said that we are immortal souls, we are immortal spirits, and what we have is a body. Our body doesn't have, we're not bodies with spirits, we're spirits with bodies in a way. So the idea here is that spirit is this intelligent principle of the universe. And I just wanted to clarify something about the vital principle, that's something that sometimes people misunderstand with the perispirit and things like that. So this, or the cosmic fluid, the idea of the vital principle is this force, let's call it the energy, almost like a battery in your cell phone, that gives life to physical being. So it is distinct from the soul, but serves as the energy for our organic body to operate. And so that's something as well, another terminology that we often are going to see, like the vital principle in the works of the Spiritist movement. Then further on, they start to go from sort of like the micro to macro. And one of the questions that they ask is, does an absolute void exist in any part of space? And again, this question certainly comes from this curious nature that we have, and this sentiment of awe that we experience whenever we are, let's say, we're gazing upon the stars, whenever we are gazing upon the night sky and we're seeing all those stars and knowing that there's so much more out there that we don't know. But is there a void? I see the stars, but in between them, is there just void? No, there is no void. What appears like a void to you is occupied by matter in a state in which it escapes the action of your senses and of your instruments. So they're saying that there is no void. They're saying that there is a matter, there is matter, a type of matter that escaped two things: our senses, meaning our very rudimentary five senses, and the instruments. Because, of course, as I said before, we are still, let's call it, in the infancy of our spiritual development. So obviously, the instruments that we have developed thus far, even though we think they are, in our limited knowledge, they are the most advanced things ever. But technology and the instruments we have are still very, very far from what they one day will be and the powers that they one day will have. So they're saying your senses are still very rudimentary, and the instruments with which you observe things and measure things is still also, they are also very rudimentary. They're also very limited. So that's why for you there seems to be like a void. There seems to be no matter. And the question 55 is interesting as well, because in the question 55, along the same lines, they ask the spirits, are all the globes that revolve in space inhabited? So all of these globes that we think, that we perhaps can observe and we know of, are they inhabited? And the answer is yes, meaning they are inhabited, meaning there is life to some extent there, just perhaps not the way we imagine it. And the spirits are going to say yes. And the people of the earth are far from being as you suppose in the first in intelligence, goodness, and general development. So here the spirits are once again circling back to that idea that there's still much out there for us to discover, and there's still much out there for us to understand. And then once again, the curiosity of the human of the human spirit and the idea of categorizing things. They asked about order of the planets, and they give 5 order of planets, and we are in the second from lowest ones, which is trials and expiations. We're moving to regeneration, etc. But they also asked about the spirits. Okay, is there degrees of spirits, or at least spiritual advancements? And they say, okay, we'll give you some classification to satiate your curiosity, perhaps. And they say there's 3 orders, and this is from the degree of elevation, so from the lowest degree to the highest, the most elevated. So the 3rd order, they divide that into 5 different categories: the impures, the frivolous, the pseudo-wise, the neutral, the noisy, and the boisterous. And they're saying for this specific spirits in this 3rd order, there's a big influence of the matter over spirit. There's a propensity for evil. We see the how prominent pride, selfishness, ignorance, and all of the evil passions. There we see all of that. There's no full comprehension of God. So again, they're the ones that are still evolving, and these are called, they also call them the imperfect spirits for this 3rd order. And then we have the 2nd order with 4 different divisions there, subdivisions: benevolence, the learned, the wise, and the high spirits. And these are what they call the good spirits. Okay, so we went from 3rd order imperfect, which encompasses 5 different levels, to the 2nd order, which has 4 different subdivisions. And those, they talk about that there's the predominance already now of spirits over matter. There's a desire for excellence. Some of them already possess a very good scientific knowledge, wisdom, charity, moral excellence. They still have to undergo the discipline of trial until they have completed the work of purification, but they definitely have advanced a lot already. And then we have the 1st order, which only one class, the first and only, pure spirits. And as you can see by that picture there, or that drawing, we already know of one. These types of spirits, they have passed up through every degree of the scale of progress, because it's also something the spirits emphasize, that you don't go from, let's say, the 9th and you jump to the 5th and then to the 2nd. There's no such thing. It's a gradual progress. But they're saying the 1st order, which it's only class, are these pure spirits, and they have attained the sum of perfection of which created beings are susceptible. They don't have to undergo the trials and expiations anymore, and there's complete predominance of, or the influence of, spirit over matter. So again, now we start to understand that there's different classifications of planets or inhabited spaces. There's also different orders of spirits. But talking about spirits that are good, spirits that are bad, one of the questions 115 says, are some spirits created good and others created bad? And they're going to say, God has created all spirits in a state of simplicity and ignorance, that is to say, without knowledge. So not the connotation for ignorance of being abrupt or rude, but in the sense of having no knowledge. So we are all created simple and ignorant. And the next question is, do any spirits remain forever in the lower ranks? No. All become perfect. They change in course of time, however long may be the process of amendment. And this is great. What's even more great is the follow-up that says, they reach the goal more or less quickly, according to the strength of their desire and the degree of their submission to the will of God. This is great news. And I think this is one of the big pieces of the consoling aspect of Spiritism, this idea that no matter how evil the actions of someone may be, every single spirit was created for perfection. They're all going to advance. They're saying here, they all become perfect. But, however, nonetheless, notwithstanding, the speed of their progress is going to depend on themselves, according, like they say there, to the strength of their desire and the degree to their submission to the will of God. And the next question, 117, they're going to explain how exactly the spirits can hasten their progress towards perfection. And if I may just do an asterisk here, there is another, and we're talking about the Spirits book and Allan Kardec, but I have to mention one of my favorite authors of all time, Leon Denis, and he, in many of his books in the realm of Spiritism, he talks about free will. And he says, that freedom or this liberty is a necessary condition of the human soul, which without it, so without that freedom, the soul cannot construct its own destiny. So the free will, again, we're all going to march towards perfection, but that's going to depend on us, how fast or how slow we're going. And some go very, very slow, as we have probably gone as well in the past, and who knows how far that past is. In the question 123, they ask, why has God permitted it to be possible for spirits to take the wrong road? The wisdom of God is shown in the freedom of choice, which he leaves to every spirit, for each has thus the merit of his deeds. The soul is the author of its own destiny, Leon Denis says. And in this idea here, we can understand that in the perfection of God, in all of that we are still trying to grasp at a little bit of what it is, we already can feel and understand that we cannot be forced to do what's right, because where is the merit in that, being forced? What happens is we are forced, and I'm putting quotation marks here, we are forced by the perfect laws that are in place. That's why the process of expiation, of coming back into the world to amend for mistakes is in place, but we're not being forced. There's no God pointing the finger forcing us to do what's right. So we do what's right, then there's no merit in that, and we don't advance like that. And then the other question, 125, will the spirits who have chosen the wrong road be able to reach the same degree of elevation as others? Meaning, those who are still erring so much, who are still killing, who are still doing all these atrocities, are they going to reach the same degree of elevation as everyone else who has already gone and achieved that? Yes. Again, the consoling aspect of the movement, but the eternities will be longer in their case. And I love this answer, because even the word eternities is very subjective, and that is what it must feel for those who are suffering and are still so entrenched in their own wrongdoings and reaping whatever it is that they're sowing. It may feel like an eternity. And we have plenty of books talking about, for instance, what happened with people who take their own lives, and how it may feel like an eternity once they're suffering for that. But what is the aim of the incarnation of spirits? Why? If we're saying we're immortal spirits and we are inhabiting a body temporarily, what's the aim of that? What's the purpose of that? It is a necessity imposed on them by God as the means of attaining perfection. For some of them, it is an expiation. For others, a mission. So we have spirits who come to earth in a material form. Again, they incarnate as a mission because they want to help advance humankind. Others, a lot of them, the incarnation for them is an expiation. It's a mean to right what was wrong, what was done wrong by that same person. So if we're talking about the incarnation, we're talking about the immortality of the soul. What happens after life? What happens after, quote unquote, life, meaning the material life? Does the soul, and this is one question they ask, question 150, does the soul after death preserves its individuality? And they say, yeah, it never loses its individuality. What would be the soul if it did not preserve itself, or if it not preserve this individuality? And Kardec here has a comment that he made in this respect, where he's talking about how it's incorrect for us to think that when the soul becomes free from the body, that it goes back to, let's say, nothing, or it goes back to there. He's saying, like, as a drop of water going back into the ocean. That is wrong to think that, because if we think of a drop of water going back into the ocean, as soon as it hits the ocean, it loses its individuality. We don't know where one begins and the other one starts, and etc., etc., etc. And that's not what happens with the soul. But what really happens then? What happens in the afterlife? And this is one of the things that Spiritism brings, that I think is great for our own understanding. Does a knowledge of Spiritism exercise any influence on the duration of the state of confusion? This is a question because they were explained, or they were told by the spirits, that when at the moment of death, everything appears like confused. And I tried to find a little drawing there to sort of exemplify as if, like, when we're waking up from a state of unconsciousness, perhaps feeling a bit stunned, like trying to get our bearings, and we woke up from a very heavy sleep. It's something of that nature. And there are a lot of books by Andre Luiz, by the psychograph by Chico and Divaldo, and a lot of, like, many different authors that talk about this process of this awakening after somebody has left their material body. But they're asking, if we know about Spiritism, so if we know about these things, can we get out of the state of confusion fairly quicker? Let's see. It exercises a variable, considerable influence on that duration, because it enables the spirit to understand beforehand the new situation in which it is about to find itself. But the practice of rectitude during the earthly life and a clear conscience are the conditions which conduce most powerfully to shorten it. So it's not just about having knowledge that, oh yes, if I die and I wake up there, I'm gonna feel a little confused, but oh yes, I studied about this for decades when I was still alive. I'm dead. I'm in the afterlife. That in itself is not gonna be necessarily enough, because they say that the soul takes some time to recover its self-consciousness, and this can be a very short time, or it can be, as we've seen again in these books that I mentioned before, decades, that the soul, the spirit becomes like that in that specific state. So having that knowledge does help, but there's things that help more: the practice of rectitude, the clear conscience, and whatever it is that we did to improve ourselves spiritually, not just materialistically. Moreover, one of the precepts of the Spirit's movement is this plurality of existences. So meaning there are multiple existences, multiple times that we become reincarnated. Even the word reincarnate, incarnate again, reincarnate. Do we accomplish all of our different corporeal existences upon this earth? No. Not all of them, for those existences take place in many different worlds. The world in which you are now is neither the first nor the last of these, but is one of those that are the most material and the furthest removed from perfection. So we know that below our world there are the primitive worlds, which are even more materialistic, or even more where the matter has an even bigger influence in the spirit, which with its state of intellect being even lower than the one that we're in right now. But they're saying we're not going to accomplish all the corporeal existences on earth, because again, remember about progress. Remember we talked about free will. So how fast or how slow are we progressing depends on us. So if we're progressing very quickly throughout multiple reincarnations, and what we do in the ereticities, or what we do in the spirit world, may hasten our progress, and then we may go somewhere else, or the other way around as well. If we keep coming back, making the same mistakes, there's going to be a point where the planet is not going to be able to harbor my own primitive self anymore, so I'm going to be having to go to another planet. But we got to remember our dear master that told us, in my Father's house are many mansions. So this is John chapter 14, or in some translations we see my Father's house are many rooms. But the idea is strongly linked to that notion that we talked about before, that there is no void out there. There is just matter in a state that we don't understand yet, and we cannot comprehend just yet. And Jesus is saying the same thing. My Father's house are many mansions. There are many stations of progress that will harbor spirits, or will have spirits, and they can then evolve. As we have had many existences, do our relationships extend beyond our present existence? So the relationships that we have here, do they extend beyond this mere existence? It cannot be otherwise, they're going to say. The succession of their corporeal existences establishes among spirits a variety of relationships which date back from their former existences. And these relationships are often the cause of the sympathies or antipathies which you sometimes feel towards persons whom you seek to meet for the first time. I think this one is an undeniable one, where we read and it does ring true, because there are people that we eventually get paired with, or paths, let's call it, may cross, and we feel like we've known them for a long time. We have a deep rooted sympathy for them, and we cannot explain how. We cannot explain why. If we were just to look at one existence, one life, that's it. Same with the other way around, of people that we really have these antipathies. And a lot of the times, if we think of the familiar unit, or the people that are closest to us, the blood relatives, they're saying here, a lot of this dates back to different experiences, different existences. And then, meaning we've known each other, but we were donning a different clothes. We had different bodies and in different circumstances, but the soul, which is immortal, persists and retains those that those inclinations, those memories. And question number 2018 is going to ask, does a spirit retain, when incarnated, any trace of the perception he has had and the knowledge he had acquired in his former existences? There remains with him a vague remembrance, which gives him what you call innate ideas. So a lot of the knowledge that we bring, a lot of these inclinations that we bring in the form of talents, in the form of things that we must improve still, in the form of qualities we already have. A lot of these come from things that we have done in past reincarnations, things we have done in past lives. And then we come here, it feels like, oh, I'm just starting to learn, I don't know, this musical instrument, or I'm just starting to learn this specific language, but it's coming so easy. Well, guess what? Perhaps you already spoke or you already learned that instrument in a past life. Now, question number 258 is, in the state of erraticity and before taking on a new corporeal existence, does a spirit foresee the things which will happen to him in that new existence? He chooses for himself the kind of trials which he will undergo, and it is in this freedom of choice that his free will consists. So we are, to a great extent, put an asterisk on that because there are exceptions. We are very in control of what we choose as far as the tests and trials, the tribulations, the expiations, in the sense that how are we going to be able to amend for those mistakes? So they're saying here that the spirit chooses for himself the kind of trials. It could be a physical challenge, could be an intellectual challenge, could be a challenge in a specific group of people, etc. And we have I have this little image there of Jesus talking with Nicodemus in that conversation that I think is amazing, when it says, very truly, I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. And Nicodemus is interesting because he took it quite literal. How can an old man be born of the womb again, right? And Jesus is saying, no. The flesh gives birth to the flesh, but the spirit gives birth to the spirit. So again, Jesus saying that in order for us to see the kingdom of God, meaning for us to be perfect enough to see the kingdom of God, we must be born again. We must be reborn. We must reincarnate. We must progress through those experiences. Now, going forward to question 457. Okay, so we know about spirits. Do they have any influence over us? Can they see our most secret thoughts? They often see what you would fain hide from yourselves. So feigning, like in vain, hide from yourselves. Neither acts nor thoughts can be hidden from them. That is a powerful answer. And to me, it's interesting that they put the word secret there in the question. Secret thoughts. Meaning not just our thoughts, but the secret thoughts. And the spirit sort of understood what the question was, because up until that point, we had this idea, this wrong idea, that our mental, fortress was impenetrable. Nothing, if I just think and no, I'm not doing it, I'm just thinking this thing here, and there's no harm there, no harm in there, because nobody's gonna see what I'm thinking. No. They're saying here, what we would fain hide from ourselves. Neither acts, meaning those things that we do when we think nobody's watching, or even those thoughts can be hidden from the spirits. And the higher the level or the higher the degree of elevation of the spirit, the greater the ability to delve into our thoughts. Well, if they can see, can they also influence our thoughts and actions? Their influence upon them, the thoughts and the actions, is greater than you suppose, for it is very often they who direct both. They who direct both thoughts and actions. So the influence is greater than you suppose. To me, that's already something that should bring an alert in our minds to understand we're not alone. We're not unsupervised in a way. We really must be careful with our thoughts, with our actions, that's almost a given. But we must be very careful with our thoughts. And the question right after that, they're asking, okay, but do we have thoughts that originate from ourselves? Or is everything just a suggestion? And they're going to say, no, no. Your soul is a spirit who thinks. And they're going to give the example. Have you not observed that sometimes you have thoughts in reference to the same subject, but are very opposite? He says, in those situations, there's a little bit of you and a little bit of us. Meaning, if we're having a thought like a very negative or very, let's call it, let's be very extreme here, an evil thought. But all of a sudden, there seems to be this other thought that it's completely opposite, comes to our minds. This is our helpers, the spirits, the benefactors. They're trying to help us to make that thought disappear, make that thought not come to fruition. Likewise with the opposite. Sometimes we may be going in a good direction, having good thoughts, but all of a sudden, it's like a different thought in the same subject comes almost as a suggestion. So we must be very, very alert and not think that everything that we do, even if there's nobody watching, nobody we can see with our physical eyes, means that we're alone, because we're never, ever alone. Now we move on to the laws. So has God given to all men the means of knowing his law? All may know it, but all do not understand it. Those who understand it best are they who seek after goodness. All, however, will one day understand it, for the destiny of progress must be accomplished. Again, they're saying in a different way, in a different manner, that we will all understand the laws of God. We will all reach that plenitude of our spirit in which we will understand the law of God. And in the Spirit's book, Kardec goes through different laws: the law of adoration, the law of reproduction, preservation, destruction, equality, etc., reproduction, progress, etc. But where is the law of God inscribed? And this is, again, just this question is already a lecture on its own, and it's a beautiful one. In the conscience. Where is the law of God? In the conscience. Meaning, we all have access to the law of God because it's right here. It's right in our conscience. So this, to me, is a very empowering aspect as well. Because sometimes if we are faced with a conundrum, if we're faced with a decision, or if we've done something that is questionable, perhaps in the eyes of men, what does our conscience say? Deep down, what does our conscience say? When we consult our conscience deep down, we have an answer. Our gut tells us that is because we may have broken the law of God. So we all have access to that. But what is then the most perfect type that God has offered man as guide and model? Jesus. Of course, Jesus. First order, first class, as we saw in a few slides ago. That is our biggest example. Our older brother, Jesus, is our best example of what we will one day achieve, but as an example, meaning what we must start to try and do to get to that point. Because we're not going to go from this reincarnation here to my next one as I'm already a spirit of first order and just like in the same level of Christ. It's very gradual. Progress is very gradual. It happens, but it's very gradual. And I must take that example and build from that. How can we distinguish between good and evil? This is obviously a common theme, especially back in the mid-19th century, with all the wars and all these things still happening, the revolutions and all that would come to pass as well. Good is whatever is in conformity with the law of God, and evil is whatever deviates from it. So how can we know? Right here in our conscience. Question 676, then we're going to talk a little bit about progress and labor. Why is labor imposed upon humankind? It is a consequence of his corporeal nature. It is an expiation and at the same time a means of developing his intelligence. Without labor, man would remain in the infancy of intelligence. So it is a consequence of this corporeal nature. It's an expiation, they're saying, but it's also a means of developing the intelligence, because if we don't use our arms, they're not gonna be useful. If we don't use our minds, we're gonna remain in the infancy of intelligence. So we must labor, but there is a limit, and that's something that they asked it in the question 683. What's the limit of labor? And they say the limit of strength, but God leaves man at liberty to basically decide for himself. So there is a limit. We shouldn't be working 24 hours and never falling asleep, and etc., etc. Or we shouldn't be just sleeping 24 hours a day and just laboring in the spirit world. No, like we must labor, and it is a consequence and is a means to an end. Is social life founded in nature? Certainly. God has made man for living in society. We must live in society. We must labor in society. We must be able to live with those, the micro society, aka our family, and then the society itself, those who at least are close to us or who are in our inner circle, perhaps, but also everybody else expanding from that. So we must live in society. We must learn from one another. We must learn all those things, because if we were to live on our own as hermits, or if we were to have the vow of silence as our thing, why would we have speech? If we were to live on our own, why would we be in a position where we are cramped with a bunch of other people in a city? We must go through that. Has the man power of arresting the march of progress? No. But he has sometimes the power of hindering progress. Again, free will. This is what it is. When they're saying the power here, they mean power of choice. They mean the free will to slow down progress. Progress, Kardec is going to have something about this where it says, progress is a condition of human nature. It is not the power of anyone to prevent it. And what is the greatest obstacle then to progress? Again, another one of those questions that we can find multiple lectures out there about. They're going to say two words: pride and selfishness. Those are still, and at the point in our lives, at this point in our human history, they are still the two greatest obstacles to progress. The two scourges of humankind right now: pride and selfishness. And of course, they're gonna clarify. They're talking about moral progress, because the intellectual progress, we have made a lot of intellectual progress in the past decades, if we think about it. But moral progress is still lagging behind, and this is one of the big key aspects of Spiritism, to try to bring this awareness for the ways for us to progress morally. So in what ways, or in what way can Spiritism contribute to progress? By destroying materialism, which is one of the sores of society, and thus making men understand where their true interest lies. The future life being no longer veiled by doubt, men will understand more clearly that they can ensure the happiness of their future by their action in the present life. By destroying materialism. That's basically what it is. Because if we were to think about, we only have one life, we only have one chance, there are going to be a lot of difficult questions following up that idea. So the idea of, and Kardec explores this very well in the book Heaven and Health. Heaven and Hell, not health. Heaven and Hell, which is a book about the divine justice. I definitely recommend reading that one as well, that he published in 1865. So earthly joys and sorrows Is it possible for men to enjoy perfect happiness upon the earth? Can we be truly happy here? No. For corporeal life has been appointed to him either as a trial or as an expiation, but it depends upon himself to lighten the evils of his lot and to render it as happy as life can be upon the earth. So we will not find complete and full happiness, perfect happiness on earth. We are not there yet. We are not there yet as spirits, and as the planet that we live in. There's all we have to do is look around and think for 10 seconds what's happening or what happens in the world, and we'll know that this is not a happy or divine world yet. What about heaven and hell then? What about those two concepts? And this is something, again, the book Heaven and Hell revolves around the explanation about what they are, or the doctrine of eternal punishment and things like that. But the spirits are going to tell us that the heaven and hell, in a way, are symbols. They're happy and unhappy spirits everywhere. So it's a matter of, is the conscience of their own spirit that's going to be in heaven or hell, either here or when the spirit no longer has a material body. So what about the purgatory? Because again, coming from a Christian background and all of those things that we have studied through, millennia now, the idea of purgatory, and they're going to say physical and moral suffering, the period of expiation. It is almost always upon the earth that you are made by God to undergo your purgatory and to expiate your wrongdoing. So that idea of purgatory, of this suffering to expiate, that's here. That's the type of planet that we are in, trials and expiations. It's a planet where, in a way, it is the purgatory. Now, if you're still with me, we go to our last question. Question number 1, what is God, right? Question number 1019. Will the reign of goodness ever be established upon the earth? And I think this is a great question to sort of close the study that was this amazing book, The Spirit's Book, 1857. Again, 168 years ago, almost 200 years ago. Will the reign then be established upon the earth? They say goodness will reign upon the earth when among the spirits who come to dwell in it, the good shall be more numerous than the bad. We could have stopped right there and understood what they mean already. For they will then bring in the reign of love and justice, which are the source of good and of happiness. It is through moral progress and practical conformity with the laws of God that man will attract to the earth good spirits who will keep bad ones away from it. But the latter will not definitively quit the earth until its people shall be completely purified from pride and selfishness. In other words, when the good spirits are more numerous than the bad, when pride and selfishness are removed from the face of the earth, then we can start to talk about the reign of goodness. Almost 200 years that we have this now, this answer. And we can definitely see that this reign of goodness is not here, because there's too much evil out there still, too much people doing wrong things, and there's too much wrongdoing. And that's okay, because the thing is, nobody can stop progress completely, and we're always going forward. It is just very, very slow. So what's the relevance for this book today? Why should we read it? How can we apply that today? This was written 168 years ago. It can give us, and I brought a few ideas here for us to think about, but there's this, invitation for moral improvement. So the first consequence of Spiritist belief is to make us better by showing us the path of duty, for showing us what needs to be done, for what we need to do slowly and surely, being disciplined about it, for our moral improvement, and moral improvement as a consequence of society. It helps us understand suffering and injustice, which we still have today. It explains the cause of human suffering and the apparent injustices of life. Because if we were to look at life as being just one life and that's it, bye bye, we would see a lot of injustices, and we cannot fathom a just and loving God that is perfect if there are injustices like that. So there must be something more. If we understand that God is pure, God is perfection, God is the supreme intelligence, God is everything that we are still trying to grasp, and He's fair and loving and kind, how can these things happen? There must be a purpose. There must be something that we try to understand, and Spiritism helps us with that. Encouraging then responsibility and free will, meaning we are the artisans of our own fates. We are the ones responsible for our actions and their consequences. We are the ones responsible for that. So it brings the sense of responsibility, of me trying to look at my own self and see how I can improve, and then doing the work to improve. It brings this idea of free will, meaning I do have a choice. There's no determinism. There are laws that I must obey. If I infringe them, there will be negative consequences and expiations, but I am the one who's making those choices. There's consolation in the face of death, and we still have death today, don't we? Of course. Spiritism removes the fear of death by showing it is not the end, but a transformation. Or we can even add it as a transition. Spiritism killed death in a way, because we see it as a transition. Promoting universal fraternity. All humans are brothers, sisters, because they are all spirits incarnated in human form. We're all in this boat here. We're all in this planet right now for a reason. We're all in this planet. Those who are incarnated, listen to me, and the discarnated as well. We're all here for a reason. And we must help one another. We must help ourselves. We must help one another. We are responsible for that. So that's the relevance of this book that was published 168 years ago as Spiritism, the third consoler, the third revelation. The consoler comes to us as a gift, as something that we must study, appreciate, understand, and use. And with that, we finish our presentation for today. I wish everybody a blessed week and also happy Easter.
Yuri, thank you so much for this amazing reminder. Um, it is a study, right? What you bring to us, and it is quite a bit. And I was amazed with the explanations that you bring, and we brought between each questions as well, and how we can utilize with the analysis that you made, especially towards the end when you brought the the idea of how can this help us in our daily lives, right? The connection with ourselves, the connection with God, right, and to perceive the continuation of life. So again, thank you for this hard work. I want to just make a point that I mentioned already before we even start this month, that this month we have a theme here at the SSB, and then obviously we didn't plan it that way. That was the idea of us living. Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, as Agnes is saying, the idea that we have, that we are in the physical body, we are spiritual beings, as well as that, we have this connection. We started the month with Alba talking about pre-existence of the soul and pre-birth experiences. Daniel actually gave a talk about conscientiousness and mediumship, and today you talking about a dialogue with the beyond. So it's this idea that we come together, and tomorrow being Easter as well, right? As you just mentioned, spiritism killed death, and it is a teachings that our Master Jesus have left us, right? That there is a continuation right after the physical body. So it's a beautiful thing that we have all these teachings, we have all these connections, and that we can make between Spiritism and the teachings of our masters. So that was just again a highlight for those who are watching us or will be watching us in the future to also go back to these different talks that we had to analyze them as well, because they are certainly a good connection to what you brought here today. With no further ado, I would like to ask anybody here if they have a question or a comment that they would like to bring to us. If you're brave enough, come here and ask behind the podium, because we are not using the microphone today, so he can hear it straight from you. If not, I'll try to repeat them. As you're thinking about your question or comment, I'll ask Daniel to help us with the first question that we have online, and then we pass the word to a question or comment here. And we have one from Orlando Gray. Where exactly does Spiritism, as codified by Kardec, diverge from maybe the more general movement of spiritualism that was popular at the time and can still be found in the spiritualist churches in the UK or even here in the United States? It seems they share a root. So what do you think are the main points of uniqueness for Spiritism?
Thank you for the question. I don't know all the spiritualist movements in the UK and other places, but I can tell that there were a lot of movements like spiritualism in the realm of spiritualism going back then, and still nowadays in different continents as well. And Spiritism, so Spiritism, the specific one that we're talking about, has a few different components that differ from some spiritual movements in spiritualism that I know of. So, for instance, there is movements of spiritualism that place a lot of emphasis on rituals and things like that. And Spiritism does not have does not have an emphasis on rituals. There are no rituals. There are things that we may do that are similar to what other people are doing in other parts of the world in the realm of Spiritism. But there's no specific ritual. So a lot of the things, as well with the knowledge that was brought, and Kardec was the codifier to compile this information and sort of go through questions and answers from all over the world. And that is something that makes it very specific in a sense and differs from other perhaps doctrines or other movements in the spiritualism realm that go around the world, even nowadays, because we all bring these inclinations from other lives as well, and we may have gone through these spiritualism movements and spiritualism in other lives, and we bring that inclination to like the ritualistic aspect of it and like certain things that spiritism does not necessarily have.
Thank you, Yuri. Anyone would like to ask a question or comment? Yeah, okay. Daniel, the next question, please. Considering Allan Kardec's background as an educator, what was the initial impact of the Spirits book on the public, and how did it contribute to the formalization of Spiritism as a distinct philosophical and spiritual doctrine?
Also, great question. The idea, I think, Danielle, behind this is it was met with a lot of backlash, especially by the scientific society. But we think about it on let's look at the glass half full here scenario. Kardec was a spirit already tasked with this endeavor before even coming on Earth and becoming reincarnated, and his whole background, his whole, like I said, methodical mind and everything that he already brought to the forefront in terms of research and study made it so that Spiritism was seen very seriously, because before him and before the Spirits book, the beginning of the Spiritist movement, everything was it was going on all over the places, and it was not very structured. So his idea, his methodical mind and everything, compiling the information and making it into something serious, which we already talked about how it has to do with religion, philosophy, and science. I think that had a strong appeal to a lot of the society. But obviously, and even nowadays, there is backlash. There are people who don't understand or don't agree, and that's okay.
As the theme goes, right? As whenever we're doing something different or diverging from the one set idea, we get backlash, right? We get the different questioning and whatnot. Yeah, but thank you. Thanks for that. Any Daniel, the next question, please. Thank you for your talk. Does an evil spirit, and this is from Abby, sorry, does an evil spirit know how their spirit may affect others? What is the lesson for all of us when we are forced to live with such a spirit? Thank you.
So again, the vocab evil spirit or is something that comes in the spirits book, which was done 168 years ago. So I just want to clarify the idea of evil spirit to say my answer. Rooted in ignorance. So the idea of an evil spirit is somebody that is still doing what is wrong. It is going against the law of God, and there's a separation there. They may be doing just purely out of ignorance, as we see in the primitive worlds or with the primitive spirits, or there could be some sort of intentionality behind those evil doings or the wrongdoings, that spirit that is still very much driven by the material side, by the evil passions, as they call in the spirits book. There's an intentionality behind that. So the idea that, yeah, it's yes and no to your question. If this evil spirit know how they may affect others, because if they're very ignorant, they may not know, or they may not even fully comprehend. And even those who are doing it on purpose may not fully comprehend the wrong that they are doing and how they will have to reap what they're sowing.
Thank you. At the end, it's still ignorance, right? But yes, I mean, it's definitely a very good clarification, because we tend to think that there is an imposition, from God as well. But the great question, great answer as well. The next question, please. Okay, hello, Kirsten. Yuri, as it regards to thoughts, can you offer your opinion on intrusive thoughts and spirit influences?
Hi, Kirsten. Yes. So as far as intrusive intrusive thoughts and this bridge between spirit influences given in the realm of spiritism, go back to question 459. How much do the spirits influence our thoughts and our actions? Greater than we suppose. So just by that answer by the spirits, we can already start to understand that a lot of these intrusive thoughts, and I'm going from the connotation that intrusive means negative or perhaps not very happy thoughts, those can very much be influence of spirits. But in the realm of psychology, intrusive thoughts, OCD behavior, things like that, if we look at that from a spiritist perspective, we can also have a second, I guess, clarification to your question, or an answer to your question, that relates to, am I bringing these thoughts from something like some other life or something that is not yet well resolved, and they're coming back because I know that I must treat them, I know I must do something with them, or I've done something in a past life with them. So it can be coming from an external source, a spirit, because their influence is greater than we suppose, or they may be arising in us because of something that has happened in our past.
Thank you, Yuri. Anyone want have change? Paula, you want to come over? Paula has a question. Give me 1 second, Yuri.
All right, let's go.
Courage.
Courage, yeah.
So I look in there. Oh, there he is.
Yep, right here.
Hi, Paula.
Hi. First, I want to thank you very much, and I'm happy this is recorded and available to tell others about, because it reminds me when I was in college many centuries ago, we used to have something called the Cliff Notes, which would summarize the book. So this is going to be a contribution like the Cliff Notes. I just wanted to tag on, before I ask my question, to the question about the differences between Spiritism and spiritualism. There was one thing I did pick up from my many different visits to Lilydale in Western New York, which is an active spiritualism center where they teach classes, and a number of us have been there, that when the spiritualists list their principles, they do not specifically cite reincarnation. They have very active communication with the spirits. They do healing, etc. Okay, my question. I'm curious because many years ago I had a conversation with a friend who was a Christian, and what she proposed to me was that in order to be saved, everyone in the world needed to be Christian and follow Jesus. So what I'm asking, how do you see the Spirit's book in coordination with all the other major spiritual texts that we have in the world from all these different religions? Thank you. I'll take my seat.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you also for the sharing your thoughts on the spiritualism. And yes, there are differences, and I love that you gave a very practical example of their presets. So that's nice. As far as my opinion on your question, as far as these different religions and different things like that, the reality is that there are a lot of religions that the underlying the subjective texts are the same ideas. That's the thing. So there's a lot of these revelations, a lot of things that have happened before, or we have around the world, that is basically like the same book with different covers in a different font with a different language, but saying almost the same message. There's way more unity than differences than we expect in these religions, and religious people who study religion, they can speak more to that. But I think the spiritism specific, or the Spirit's book, and we talk about spiritism as being the third revelation or the consoler. There is a question that asks, why now? And they're saying because now humanity is at a point where it can't understand some of these concepts. It couldn't understand perhaps 3,000 years ago, and if this was done, or these answers came 3,000 years ago, we would not be able to internalize them and externalize them through actions and through truly modifying ourselves. So again, my main focus, I guess, is that it comes to add. Jesus says it didn't come to destroy the law. So it comes to add, it comes to modify, but in a very natural way, because a lot of these spirits that are perhaps still entrenched in religions of the past, or religions that have been misinterpreted, even on Christianity, have been misinterpreted, have been either on purpose or by accident. And the idea that there is still a lot for us to learn, and change is slow, but change is happening. So that what we can do is look at ourselves, take the knowledge that has been bestowed upon us, and then grow from there.
Thank you, Yuri. And thanks for the question, Paula, too. We have one more question from our friends online. Orlando again. Along the lines of instructive thoughts, those are common feature of OCD and cause significant emotional and debilitating distress. When it comes to disease process of the mind and body, what is the precipitating factor usually? A biological imbalance that leads to spiritual imbalance, or a spiritual imbalance that leads to biological imbalance? Is that a chicken or the egg type question? Or is it even a useful question?
Orlando, it is a useful question. I really think it's a useful question. And it's not a chicken or the egg type of question, but it is a question that doesn't have one specific answer, because we oftentimes, and more often than not, we cannot trace what was the root cause. So for instance, we may be these intrusive thoughts. Let's say I mentioned they could be something that I've done in a past life, and then I'm bringing in this reincarnation, still some of the traces of what I did in that past life, and they come in the form of OCD or intrusive thoughts. those thoughts, and as we learn with spiritism, they definitely shape our reality. They definitely can shape our world, and they definitely shape the cosmic fluid, which is a type of matter as well. So our thoughts can shape our biological makeup. They can definitely shape our biological makeup. Whereas the other way around is also possible. We may choose to reincarnate with a certain physical problem or a physical limitation, and because of that, and we're expiating, let's say, something we've done, or we chose that as a trial, perhaps. Because of that physical limitation, I'm gonna be having intrusive thoughts regarding that. So that came in a way first, and then intrusive thoughts came after. But the other way around is also possible.
Very good question, and thanks for the answer, Yuri. Yuri, to finalize, I will ask a question. Can I?
Of course.
So we don't. I don't think we have any more questions online. But and I'm trying to make this personal, but at the same time, you don't have to, give a specific details of it. But in your study of spiritism, in diving especially on this presentation, because I'm quite sure the way you did it so well, you had to really dive into it and to remember all um, um, these questions and the work that you have been doing with spiritism. What is the greatest impact on your life in terms of how you deal with the loved ones at home, those family members, as well as, if you may, also add on how do you deal in your workplace on the work that you do, dealing with minds that are still learning, let's say it that way.
Great question. I think what changes to me, at least in my work, is it gives me a different sets of lens to see the world and see people through those sets of lens. When you're looking at somebody whose mental condition is extremely debilitated, or is extremely like deteriorating, or has severe impairment, I know now because of spiritism that there must be something because of that. Every effect has a cause, as we learn. So that cause, or I mean, that the effect cause type of thing helps me see them in a different way and understand them in a more, I guess, like with a loving eye, I guess I can say, or with um, a more caring eye as well, because it's like we're all here. We're all meant to be in a society. We're all meant to be here together, helping each other, helping ourselves in the process, helping ourselves so we can help the others. So I guess the profession, or my profession, my day to day, I'm blessed that I can be a part of many people's journeys through that discovery process, through the healing process. And understanding spiritism helps me understand them through a different type of, like, through different sets of lens. And I think from a personal, again, this is more professional, I guess, from a personal perspective, this idea that pride and selfishness are still the scourges to our progress as human beings, but also as my progress, as the progress of my brothers and sisters, as a progress for everyone. So if I don't work on that myself, and especially being on the lookout of things that I say or that I do or that I don't do that are rooted in pride and selfishness, I'm not going to be able to help myself or help others. I'm just going to be slowing my own march of progress. So I think, to me, is looking at things that I'm doing that are still okay. That's rooted in pride. That's rooted in selfishness. I have to improve that, and having that sort of critical yet loving eye towards ourselves.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if I was getting to your personal life, but
No,
again, I
no.
like to hear it because these are the things that we ask one another. These are the things that we hope for one another, right? As we study spiritism, to look within and find a way to balance ourselves with the ideal, not just to be, to be selfish, but with the ideal that with the consequences of that interchange, that we can also change others as well. So on that note, thank you for your answer, as well as for this hard work. I would like to thank as well the wife and the two kids as well, giving us the ability to partake with you here in this little extra hour that hopefully will be many hours online. for the brothers and sisters as well, will be watching us in different times as well. So in the archive of the good work at the SSB, as you know, Daniel will be continue to be in contact, bugging you, come on, come back, until the day, as I said at the beginning, that Yuri, you got to come here, So if you're nearby in DC, Virginia, whatever, that you have many houses in this area that you can stay and come and see us physically as well.
Appreciate that, definitely.
Anytime. And we would like to just stay with us. We're going to say a final prayer together, and then bid ourselves farewell afterwards. And then we'll go into our second part of the work here at the SSB. Dear Lord, we would like to thank you for this beautiful moment that we had here. A reminder that just through conversations that we may be having, beautiful things can start. A reminder that just by basic conversations that we may be having, destructive things can happen. And we are to choose whom we are speaking with, whom we are conversing with, and make a choice to make better decisions without asking ourselves to be something that we're not. We ask you, dear Lord, that you guide us in these conversations with ourselves that we think that is with ourselves, but are truly conversations with the beyond. As Kardec made a choice to speak with other minds, with other hearts, to study them, to receive guidance, and in many cases also guide those in the beyond, and guide all of us in these beautiful teachings of the science called Spiritism. Let us show our gratitude towards these teachings by exercising what we have seen here today. The changes that Spiritism can bring to our lives, and eventually the lives of many. Let us consider these teachings now with the understandings that we have from the past to build a better future for all of us. As we also ask for our family members, our friends, co-workers, those whom we still have to fix some things here and there. We ask that you guide us into a better future. May your guidance be with our friend Yuri and his family and each one of us. We thank you, dear Lord, and so be it.